Hey everybody, this is Cecil Alexander with Jazz Lesson Videos, and today we're going to be talking about how to play bebop. Bebop is a style that was pioneered in the 1940s by people like Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, and Dizzy Gillespie, and it's characterized by fast-moving chord progressions, usually fast tempos, and solos that really clearly outline the harmony that the rhythm section is playing. All the materials I'm going to share with you in this video are going to come from my latest resource with Jazz Lesson Videos, Bebop Essentials. In this course, you'll find several hours of material dedicated to building a solid bebop foundation, including exercises on melodic chromaticism, scalar playing, arpeggios, as well as breakdowns of essential bebop chord progressions and standards. You'll also find a PDF workbook with dozens of transcriptions of solos that you can study as we go along. If you're interested in downloading the course, you can find the link in the description below, and feel free to use the coupon code BEBOP25 for an additional $25 off. So the first tip is going to be how to incorporate more chromaticism in a melodic way in your bebop soloing. I think chromaticism is a really great way of just adding a layer of complexity to your lines and giving yourself more ways of getting from point A to point B. So one of my favorite ways to incorporate chromaticism into your playing is through the use of bebop scales. Bebop scales are just a way of adding chromaticism logically so that you ensure that the chord tones of the chord you're playing on still fall on strong beats. So there are three bebop scales that I like to use in my improv and kind of base a lot of my language around. So one will be the major bebop scale. So if I do that on C, that'll be the C major scale with a flat 6 added. So you usually want to play bebop scale lines descending, and you typically will use arpeggios for ascending motion. Just kind of a good rule of thumb for creating really idiomatic sounding lines, but obviously that's not always going to be the case. So the second bebop scale will be the G dominant bebop scale. So we'll take G mixolydian, and we're going to add a natural 7th to that, so F sharp. And then the last one will be the Phrygian dominant bebop scale. So you remember the Phrygian dominant scale is going to be the 5th mode of harmonic minor. So if we take a look at A harmonic minor, and we go to the 5th mode of that, so just starting the scale from the 5th degree, we're going to add a D sharp to that scale. So with the scales, you want to make sure that you can play descending lines from all of the chord tones. In the C major bebop scale, it's going to be the root, 3rd, 5th, and 6th. So if I play descending lines from all of those notes, it'll sound like this. So here's the root, the 6th, the 5th, and the 3rd. If I take a look at the G dominant bebop scale, that'll be the root, 3rd, 5th, and flat 7th. So here they are descending. Here's the root, here's the flat 7th, here's the 5th, and the 3rd. And then if I take a look at the E Phrygian dominant bebop scale, that'll be the root, 3rd, 5th, and flat 7th again. So here's the root, the flat 7th, the 5th, and the 3rd. But you also want to be able to play descending lines from every other chromatic note as well. So if I take a look at the C major bebop scale, and I want to play descending lines from a non-chord tone, for example, say D, F, or B, what I want to do is add more chromaticism to the scale typically. You could also just play the mode as is, but I think it's cool to get more of that chromatic sound in there. So starting from D, I want to add an extra approach so that I put C on a strong beat, and then it's just like I'm descending the scale from the root. Here it is from F. So notice I did an enclosure, and then from B. So you're always thinking of setting up the next lowest note within the scale. Same thing with the non-scale tones. So D flat, even though it's outside of the scale, I want to think of connecting it into the scale. E flat, I'm first going to enclose D, then resolve D to C. F sharp, kind of the same thing. I first enclose F, resolve it to the third, and go down the scale. Then from A flat, even though that's the bebop scale passing tone, it's a pretty dissonant note when you put it on a strong beat. And then B flat. So the next tip is going to be how to break down the blues form. Blues form is going to be essential to jazz and bebop as well. In the full course, we'll have 5 different melodies on the blues form, as well as solo etudes, so that you can study some different soloing concepts. So we're going to deal with the blues in the key of B flat for our analysis. Our first chord change is going to be a B flat 7 in the first measure. And then usually, some people will call this a quick change blues, is when you have the quick change from the 1 chord to the 4 chord in the second measure. So in the second measure, you'll have E flat 7, our 4/7 chord. And then in the third measure, you'll go back to the 1/7 with B flat 7. In the fourth measure, you'll have a 2/5 to set up E flat 7, or more specifically, 5 minor 7, 5/7 to 4, into 4/7. For our 6th measure, sometimes you'll just kind of stay on that E flat 7. Other times you might have an E diminished. In some variations on the blues form, you might see 4 minor 7 to flat 7/7, which we know is the backdoor 2/5. There's a lot of different things you might come across in that setting, but the most common thing to do in the 6th measure is just to stay on the 4/7. After that, we're going to go back to our 1/7, and then going into our third line of the blues form, we're going to have a 3 minor 7 to the 5/7 of 2. That'll set up 2 minor 7 for 1 measure, 5/7 for 1 measure, which is our F7. And then we have our turnaround at the end, which is going to be 1/7 to the 5/7 of 2 to 2 minor 7 to 5/7. Sometimes those 1/7s in the turnaround might be replaced with D minor 7, which is our 3 minor 7. Again, those are very similar chord changes, so you can kind of get away with playing either one a lot of times when you're soloing. It just kind of depends on the accompaniment. So you'll notice with the blues progression, it's kind of characterized by a dominant tonic, which is a little bit unusual. And we have our dominant 4 chord, and it's just kind of to add to that bluesy sort of color of the tune. So you'll have things like the blues scale that you can use to highlight the different changes and kind of play using a key center approach. So that would be B flat blues scale is just a B flat minor pentatonic with a flat 5th degree added to it. So B flat, D flat, E flat, E, F, and A flat. And you can kind of just freely use that through the blues form to play like really nice, singing melodies. Some other scale options that you have as you're soloing through the form, you could use B flat mixolydian, or even the B flat dominant bebop scale over the B flat 7. On E flat 7, you could use, again, the respective mixolydian or dominant bebop scales, but you could also use the Lydian dominant scale, which is going to be from B flat melodic minor, which we talked about in an earlier section. That's going to allow you to play that sharp 4, and that's because this E flat 7 is not a functioning dominant chord, so it doesn't have a lot of pull to it. It doesn't want to resolve up a 4th or down a 5th. Going back to the 1 chord, again, mixolydian or dominant bebop. And then to set up the 4 chord in our 4th measure, you could feel free to play around with some altered tensions. So using the B flat altered scale, Phrygian dominant, half whole diminished, anything that you want to kind of exploit some of those altered tensions, like the sharp 9, the sharp 5, or the flat 9, for example. Then on our 2/5, that's going to set up the 2 minor 7 chord. So we had D minor 7, G7. You could play off of, D Phrygian, for example, into G, any kind of altered G, because it's setting up a minor chord. And then we have C Dorian into F, where you could use any dominant scale. I like to use just natural tensions on that 5 chord, but you could play around with some altered tensions again. But F dominant bebop is always kind of a safe choice because it's going to highlight those chord tones. And then over our turnaround, you'll remember from the section where we were talking about essential bebop chord progressions, A lot of times I like to just think of one chord going to the 5 chord. So just one measure of B flat 7 going into one measure of F7, or even one measure of G7 going into one measure of F7, kind of whatever you're hearing in the moment. So next up, we're going to be breaking down a really common bebop standard, Yardbird Suite, written by Charlie Parker, which incorporates some really fundamental harmonic devices that you're going to need to get into your playing. This one's going to be in the key of C. We're going to start off with C major 7, our 1 chord, and then we have F minor 7 to B flat 7, which you'll remember from a previous section is going to be the backdoor 2-5, so that's 4 minor 7 flat 7 7. And then instead of leading into C major 7 again, we go to C7, which will be 1 7 to B flat 7, which is going to be our sub 5 7 of 6, or a tritone sub of E minor, going to A7, which is our 5 of 2. Then we're going to have D7, which is 2 7, or the 5 7 of 5, into 5 7, and then we have a turnaround at the end, which is our 3 to the 5 of 2 to 5. And our second A section will be the same as the first, except we just end with a big 5 to 1 resolution. And leading into the B section, we have sharp 4 minor 7 flat 5 into the 5 7 of 3, which is going to set up 3, which is also kind of functioning as a new tonal center. So we're kind of modulating the key of E minor. We again have that minor 2-5 back to E minor. Then we have A7 kind of slipping back into the key of C with that A7. That's going to be the 5 7 of 2. We then have 2 minor 7, another minor 2-5 to set up 2 7, or the 5 7 of 5, and then a 2-5 to lead us back into C, where our last A section changes are going to be the same as the second, where we end with that big 5 to 1, and then our turnaround progression at the end. So now I'm going to play through the melody of Yardbird Suite and take one chorus through the changes. For the last section, we're going to go over the importance of transcription by studying some of my favorite bebop solos and how to get some melodic devices from them. We're going to take a look at Bud Powell on Cherokee from the record Jazz Giant. This is one of my favorite solos. It's a really great solo with a ton of vocabulary in it and an especially fast tempo. So right off the bat in this solo, on the 4th measure of the transcription, we have this really great sort of major pentatonic line that's got some chromaticism kind of slipped into it. So we go up like a B flat major pentatonic, and then we grab these chromatic enclosures to lead into D, the 3rd of our B flat major 7, and then back down kind of a B flat major pentatonic outline there. So this approach we touched on in previous section, this kind of enclosure that you can do in various parts of the scale, but also outside of the scale, going into the scale, and inside the scale, going out of the scale. So a really helpful way of practicing an enclosure like this is to first think of starting lines with it, like maybe taking a static B flat major 7, and then trying to start with that enclosure and then extend the line with some material that you already have as part of your vocabulary. So maybe on B flat major 7 I go. So I approach the root with that enclosure, do a diatonic enclosure to the 7th of B flat major 7, and then go down chromatically till I get to the 5th, and then go down the scale till I get to the 3rd. And then you want to get comfortable with it enough to the point where you can put it in the middle of a line like Bud Powell does here. So you're looking for those openings where you can kind of think of that starting pitch of the enclosure. So say, again, I want to do the enclosure from the 7th. I want to make sure that I get to that 7th on a strong beat. So maybe I do something like this. Right, so I started with some bebop oriented material, and then I made sure that I kind of circled around that 7th so that I could use it as a phrase extender, kind of another way of getting from point A to point B. Another moment that's really interesting in this solo is measure 16, where over a 3 minor 7 flat 5 to the 5 7 of 2, Bud Powell just kind of generalizes that section harmonically to be a big 5 7 of 2, and he uses this G Phrygian dominant bebop scale. So starting from the 5th, so he goes down the scale from the D natural, which also happens to be the root of that 3 minor 7 flat 5, and then we get to the root of that G7, and then we're going to do kind of a diatonic surrounding of the 5th of the C minor 7 that's coming in the next measure. So that just kind of goes to show that when you have these fast moving 2 5s, you can kind of just simplify them to be the related dominant chord with the respective dominant bebop scale, or even just dominant language that you have under your fingers already. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you got something out of this video. And again, if you feel like digging a little bit deeper, feel free to check out my latest resource with jazz lesson videos, Bebop Essentials. You can use the link in the description below. Feel free to use the coupon code Bebop25 for an additional $25 off. And also feel free to like, comment, and subscribe because it really helps this channel grow. I'll see you next time.